No small talk. Nothing that might reveal who we are or what we do. You're here for what, you're here for how. What is your department? Not my business. As I understand it, we're trying to prevent World War III.
Good morning. How's Europe doing? Not so well today, I see. I woke up this morning to hear about how Nord Stream 2, the pipeline that goes from Russia to Germany. Well, I heard that Nord Stream 2, the gas flow, or the flow, because there is no gas flowing through it, but the pressures, well, basically, somebody sabotaged it. Yeah, and then within like just a few hours after that, Nord Stream 1 also got sabotaged. So this means that because of the sabotage, even if all of a sudden magically the Germans and the Russians got to be buddies, there is no way for Russia to send gas to Germany anymore. You know, that's off the table forever. Because the sabotage, as I understand it, and it was indisputably sabotage, and I'll get to that in just a moment. Well, the sabotage, the damage apparently is such that it's not going to be like a weekend job. It's no. Apparently it's going to be at least months, possibly years before this can get fixed. Because seawater entered the system, I mean, it caused a whole mess. And it wasn't the little fishies that nibbled through the pipeline and made a hole in them. No, it was sabotage. Okay? There's never been something like this happen before in these pipelines, in any of these gas pipelines that are underwater. The only way to do this is to have an explosion underwater that punches a big old hole and wrecks the pipeline. And that's basically what appears to have happened in both of the pipelines within a 12 or 24 hour period. So, we have a murder mystery. Somebody killed the gas pipelines, and we have a room full of suspects. And who are the suspects? Who are the players? Well, the players you got here, you got the Russians. Of course, they're the Russians. You've got the Germans, the victims. Maybe they did it, maybe you murder Roger afterwards, something like that kind of thing, right? You've got the Ukrainians and you've got the Americans. Now, the Russians, would they blow up the pipeline? Why would they? They don't need to. Because, as I understand it, these pipelines are so deep that you need submarines to actually be able to do this job. So you can't do it with divers. It's too deep, as I understand it. I could be wrong, but let's assume that that's the case. Okay? So you need a submarine to be able to do this damage. So why would the Russians do it? Because, the Russians, they're the ones supplying the gas. And back in Russia, they've got this tap, it's a little thing. I've seen pictures. Righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. All they have to do is, righty-tighty, no more gas. They don't need to blow up anything. I mean, they certainly have the submarines to do it. They have the means to do it. But they don't have the motivation to do it. Now, would the Ukrainians do it? No, most definitely. They, in fact, are the ones who cut the flow of gas to Europe from Russia. Because, remember, and don't let anybody fool you, when the special military operation started back in February, and all throughout the conflict, the Russians, Gazprom, kept on sending gas, dispatching gas through the pipelines that went through Ukraine for Gazprom's customers in Poland and Germany and further afield in Europe. They were doing that. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise. They were. And it was the Ukrainians who unilaterally shut down those pipelines for reasons, to stick it down. Now, would the Germans do it? Well, no, because the political leadership in Germany, they're all on board of not wanting Russian gas because reasons. Stick it down, So the Germans wouldn't do this sabotage. I don't even know if they have submarines to do it. Assume that they do. I have no idea if they have submarines or not, let alone submarines that could do such a thing. But let's assume that they did. Why would they? Their political leadership is all in favor of cutting Russian natural gas. And so that leaves the Americans. The Americans, unlike the Ukrainians, for instance, the Ukrainians and the Americans have submarines that can do such a thing. Ukraine doesn't. So they couldn't be the ones who did it. The Americans sabotage this pipeline. I mean, we're all adults. Okay? Who is it going to be? France, UK, India. India is going to send one of its submarines all the way from India, all the way to the Baltic Sea, South Africa. It was the Americans. They have the means they have the motivation. And what would be the motivation? Well, if there's no Nord Stream 1 or 2, there is simply no way for Russian gas, to flow in Europe for the foreseeable future. And that, of course, means that there is no way for Germany and Europe to make an agreement with Russia. Now, of course, this is incredibly stupid because, the Europeans, they're not fools, they're not old fools. They're going to realize that the Americans everything is influenced. It's obvious. And so what you have is that the Americans, in order, in some misguided way, to disincentivize the Europeans from ever negotiating a ceasefire with Russia, they blew up this lifeline to Europe. They blew up the possibility of any gas flowing from Russia to Europe. There's a famous story that Cortez, when he arrived in the New World, he burned his ships to motivate his men. You think that's crazy, but desperation is a powerful motive, and that's why Cortez did it. I think that the Americans, in some idiotic and misguided sense, thought to themselves that if they blew up the pipeline, there would be no way for negotiations to happen between Europe and Russia. And they're going to use all of their social media allies and minions and whatnot to convince the world that the Russians did it. The Russians have no motivation to do this. None whatsoever. They have no need, because like I said, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. The Americans did it, and by doing this, they have killed the European economy. This isn't a declaration of war against Russia. This is the American declaration of war against Europe. They want Europe to suffer. And I'd always thought to myself before this moment that the Americans were basically just thinking to themselves, we want the gas from Russia to Europe to stop because, it helped put pressure on the Russians. I never truly thought to myself that the Americans would be so cavalier and so evil, and I don't say that word lightly, that they would be so evil and cavalier as to try to deliberately kill the European economy. But there is no other way to look at this incident. The Americans did it because they have the means and motivation to do it. And the German economy is going to suffer. And that means the European economy. What does that mean? It means that the people of Europe are for sure not going to have any gas during this coming winter. No gas means no fertilizer, means no electricity, means no heat. And no fertilizer, of course, means no food. And this is the most evil thing that the United States has ever done. And they are trying to deliberately kill an entire continent, the European continent. They are deliberately trying to do this. There is no other way to look at this. There is no other way there's no other conclusion. It's not merely that they were trying to twist the arm of the Europeans to ensure that they stayed on board. Well, it's not that they wanted to keep the Europeans from making some kind of arrangement with the Russians. No, they are trying to kill the Europeans. This is a declaration of war of the United States against the European people. And the EU, the European government, the German government for that matter, they're all these minions, these little puppets of the Americans. And what was going on with the Meloni election, in Italy, where all of a sudden you have a right-wing government that comes into power, and Berlusconi is in the mix. And Berlusconi has very good relationships with Vladimir Putin. There's no question that the Italians, they're going to figure out a way to work with the Russians to solve their own energy problems. that's what the Americans were afraid of, that the Germans would have a change of government or something like this, and they would reestablish ties with Russia, and the gas would flow once again, and so the German people would have heating, would have electricity, would have food. And so in their panic, they did this. That's what happened. It's clear as day. I mean, just look at the board. You look at the chessboard. You know, I used to think that it was like a conspiracy theory to think that the Americans wanted to keep the Germans in particular down. You know, there's always been the saying that NATO was created to, scare the Russians, exalt the Americans, and keep the Germans down. I never really thought that. I never really believed it in my bones. Now I do. And now I realize that the Americans will stop at nothing to destroy all of their allies. Because what's really happening is that the Americans, the global American empire is collapsing, and they are lashing out in all directions, and they are even hurting their own allies. The allies that they have in their back pocket, I mean the Germans, the Europeans, they are doing everything that the Americans wanted, but that wasn't good enough. If I'm a European, I don't care about Hitler anymore. The Russians, who cares about that? They're not important. The real enemy of Europeans are the Americans. The Americans want to destroy their continent. And you, American citizens, there's a fucking thing you can do about it. Your leadership isn't going to listen to anything that you fucking say. You're a fucking fascist for crying out loud, so they're not going to listen to you. The American government, the American leadership class, has been hijacked by true people who care nothing for the suffering of the German people or the European people. In fact, they want them to suffer. Because they realize that since the global American empire is collapsed, they want to pull down all of their allies. That is the only way to interpret this sabotage. It was an American declaration of war against the Europeans. Understand what's going on.
That's just the way we see time. Either way we're on the tape, you made it happen. Don't try to understand it. Feel it.